chat menu, and if you click on it, it'll open up the chat window, and Liz has already posted and Curtis has posted everything. And feel free to ask questions there if you don't want to interject. And we'll just go from there. So in terms of announcements, I guess one of the things that I want to do is as most of you know, or many of you know, we had a group buy about 3 weeks ago. It was actually kind of a simultaneous 3 different things we did, or 4, depending on how you count. There was a wet spot order that Chris Smith put together. It's, I think, our biggest order we've ever done. It went pretty smoothly. The only issue there was one bag that broke in transit, but the fish apparently survived, or at least it had survived as of arrival. And I don't think Chris is on, but I really want to thank him for the work he put into this. I mean, he spent at least a full day on this order. He, putting it together, I know, takes hours. You're on the phone multiple times with the vendor. And then on the day of delivery, he had to organize it all. And he was went to the parking lot of the vet school, and he was there, I think, for 4 straight hours. Next time he might do it a little differently, and just have people come all at once. We had originally tried to do the order in such a way that both Gemco, Brine Shrimp Direct, everything else could all be delivered at the same time. We weren't able to pull that off. The logistics are a bit more complicated. It turns out for like Gemco, they sell like dry goods, like you get fish food, like flake foods and pellets and things, but also frozen food. They will ship the frozen 2-day air, and they'll ship the other stuff at a ground rate, which is lower, so they'll arrive at different times. So you've got to have the freezer space to actually hold that. We did that with Gemco. We did that with Brine Shrimp Direct. I thought with Brine Shrimp Direct we would just order brine shrimp eggs, but once people started looking, we ended up buying some fish food, and I know Todd got a big tub of flakes, and I got a tub of flakes that I split with Jay Levine, and neither of us ever tried them, but they are apparently a hit. I put them in my tank, and the fish go right after them, so that was a positive thing. In terms of the Gemco order, I want to thank Mark Dominowski for doing that. That one didn't go quite as smoothly, and we can thank our friends at FedEx for that. There was they apparently just lost a shipment somehow, and insisted they had delivered it 2 hours after it had left the facility in Pennsylvania, which obviously didn't make a lot of sense. And he literally had to go to the site a week later, I think in Kernersville, and spend an hour or 2 there waiting in order to get it. But we all ended up getting it all. I went to the vet school on Saturday, met the people in Raleigh with the Brine Shrimp Direct order and with the Gemco stuff that I got from Mark. And other than Jamie, who's some of her stuff I still have, I think it's all been distributed, but we're good. There's also a group buy that just went out the door. Neil Frank put together an order for Christine Castleman's new plant book. People that are in the plant business know her work for a long time. She's got one of the definitive books with lots of color pictures and a lot of research into them. And there's an updated edition with a bunch of new plants. It's in English. And the thing I find a little bit odd is it's not really available easily. And she is, I think, shipping it out of her house literally herself at the moment. And that's about it, I guess. The other thing I just report, we do have a report on the workshop. The workshop was held 2 months ago. We roughly broke even when you sort of add up the cost of the workshop for the speakers and the travel, the banquet and all that, and then the amount we made at the actual auction. The auction turnout was really pretty good. We had more people this year selling stuff and buying stuff than we did last year, but the overall amount of sales was a little bit lower, for various reasons. I do have a report that the board approved. I haven't actually put it up on the web page, but that's a to-do that I'm a little bit overdue on. The intention there is to basically create a space on the website where we post, you track these documents so people can look at them, and then they can follow up with the board or on the list if they have further questions or comments. And I think that's all I had here. Any questions on that? Or turn it over to Michael.
Hey, let me just make sure I'm not on mute. I don't think I am. First, also, thank you, Thomas. I wanted to thank as Thomas did, not just Chris and Mark and Gerald, but Thomas as well. We had four different types of wet spot or different types of mail orders last month. Some went cleaner than others based on various variables. But as Thomas said, we did manage to pull off something which was normally kind of difficult. Chris did a lot of work in organizing his, spent a long time distributing the products at the vet school parking lot, which is probably where we're going to want to make sure we agreed to have as a meeting place, since everybody knows where that is. And he spent 3 to 4 hours one afternoon waiting for people to show up. So I wanted to thank Chris as Mark, as Thomas did, but also Thomas did stuff as well as Mark and Gerald. Again, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that I monitor various activities from other clubs, their newsletters, their meetings, their activities regarding trips and conferences. Everybody's in the same boat as we are right now. We're all handling it a little bit differently. Some clubs have completely just shut down until things resume. They're just sending out newsletters. We're obviously doing things with the online meetings. The board's been meeting online on an average of maybe twice a month since this started. Sometimes, I think one month we met 3 times. So we're trying to keep informed of what's going on and making sure everybody is aware that we're doing our best to ensure this goes as smoothly as possible. I wanted to make sure everybody still is getting the newsletter. I sent that out last week, and I'll continue to do so as I always have done throughout this whole episode. And if there's a problem, please let me know. A number of new people are asking for the newsletters. I'm assuming they're Facebook people, which is fine. But make sure you know to send your comments to the to the email ID on Yahoo for the club. You may have noticed that as far as trips go or things, extracurricular activities, which I always like to have at least one a month going in addition to the meeting, those have kind of been slowed down, obviously. But I am trying to make sure we still do our picnic and our collecting trip and our stream cleanup in August. We've been doing that in August now for about 4 years at Sertoma Park in North Raleigh near Shelley Lake. And I will still plan, again, anything can happen, but I will still plan for that. So next month I'll send out a note with the newsletter that asks for people who may want to attend, so I can go ahead and plan things like food and stuff like that, logistics. And lastly, I went to the vet school this afternoon, as a matter of fact, because I wanted to get the latest on this, and pretty much nothing has changed from the report I gave last month, which is that they are obviously monitoring this on a daily basis. They did cancel their classes. They went totally online in mid-March, and they did their graduation and stuff like that using whatever technology they could to make that go as best it can. They've curtailed their summer school activities. They're doing a lot of that online too, and they said they'd let us know just as soon as anything of significance changes. I'm hoping that by September we can resume meeting at the vet school like we have been for so many years. But until I have the official word from them, we're going to be conducting our meetings online for at least the summer. I'm sure they won't let us back in before September. So that's basically the update that I have from everybody. And today I did talk to somebody in a position to make that decision regarding our resumption at the vet school for our meeting. So I feel pretty confident that we'll be operating like this for the next 2 or 3 months. And then as soon as something changes, I'll make sure everybody is aware. Any questions or comments from anybody?
Quick note, NC State's fall semester has actually changed its calendar. So it's actually going to start classes in August.
But as far as us being able to go back to the vet school, I'll wait for one of the administrators to tell me that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas here. I mean, what I'll say is that all the universities generally are moving their calendar up a month, and they are like ending before fall or before Thanksgiving, and they're really telling people do not leave campus at all for that entire stretch. And we're kind of an outside group too, even though we're associated with the vet school, we're kind of outsiders. So we're going to be pretty low on the priority in terms of getting access to the building, I expect. That's just the reality. And they're going to be, they want to minimize interactions with people that are not there on a regular basis.
Yeah, you're right about that, Thomas. I do want to minimize interactions. And yes, I know a lot of schools are moving things up to be able to allow their students to go home at Thanksgiving and then not come back until the spring semester. Absolutely right. I just want to correct you slightly, though. We are a bona fide club of the vet school. We have a charter. We have, I mean, we're there. So I can't imagine them opening up their clubs and activities to other groups like the pig and poultry one, like the equestrian one, like the dog and cat one, and not opening to us either. But I did not hear, like I said, to the contrary about that. But as long as you put that bug in my ear, I'll go ahead and check it.
Well, I sure hope we can meet soon again.
Yeah.
And the fish that are at the vet school right now are being taken care of daily?
You know, that's a great question, Jamie. I sent a note to the other Jamie, Madigan. Actually, I've sent her 2 notes since this whole thing began back in March, and I haven't heard back from her. So I'm assuming, well, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I mean, she knows we're here to help her if she wants some help, but I have not heard back from her on either of those 2 notes. The last note I sent her now is over a month old. So, and I haven't heard from Greg Lubart either. So I'm sure if something really came up, he would contact me also. So no news may be good news, but I just don't know, Jamie.
Okay, I just asked because I know that I had donated a few of my Hoplarcus, and they were going into quarantine when all this happened. So if they were in quarantine, I'm not sure, you know, who was in charge. I'm aside from Jamie, I'm hoping that Jamie is taking care of them. So.
Well, I know, like I said today, like I said, I went to the vet school, and not unexpectedly, their emergency room services are still operational, as they have been throughout this whole coronavirus episode. So I know they have people physically in the building every single day. Now, whether someone's going down to feed the fish, I mean, there's also a marine tank, which has, you know, 10 times more concerns of its care and well-being in the lobby. I'm certain somebody is taking care of that. They're not just letting those fish, you know, fend for themselves. So I just don't know the specifics on that. I haven't gotten any word.
All right, so that was our club business update from Thomas and Michael. And I do not, because the agenda has the actual talk beginning at 8, and that agenda was published for everyone, we have about 15 minutes, and I'd like to use that time for anyone who's new to maybe introduce themselves if they feel comfortable doing so, or if you're old hat around here, if you want to share with us something new that's happening in your tanks right now, this would be a great opportunity for us to kind of hear what's going on or what people have been up to. So I'm going to open the floor. If you need to unmute yourself, the easiest way to do so is to hit your space bar. It's a great push to talk button. You press the space bar, you talk, you let go of it, it'll remute you. Okay. So anybody who'd like to share what it is that they're doing or working on, we'd love to hear it. Karen, you have any baby axes down there? What is that? Is that a crawfish?
All right, can you guys hear me?
There you are. I could see you,
Okay.
but I couldn't hear it.
Oh, this is like my first Zoom meeting, so for anything.
Okay. I had everybody muted, but you can unmute yourself whenever.
Okay.
But those are crawfish?
Yeah.
Those are awesome.
Oh, there's a blue one. This one's a fish eater.
Oh, yeah, they are. Absolutely gorgeous, though.
Thank you.
What about,
Are you feeding them the same pellets you feed the axes?
No, I find that they want more vegetables than they do like meat product. Like they'll eat some of the fish flake that falls down, but this one here will eat the guppies. I've got some little feeder guppies going around in here, and she'll stalk them and catch them.
Yeah, I've actually seen. I had marmor krebs once, which are some marbled crayfish, and I caught one of them dangling from the fins of one of my fish in the tank once, and that's when I realized that they were not the bottom feeders I was led to believe.
No, the marbled crayfish are self-cloning. I'm trying to find some of those. But these came from Ken Osborne up in High Point. I think he's in one of the mutual groups here. So,
very cool.
hold on.
Hey,
Let somebody else go and let me turn it around, and I'll get the other stuff. I'll show you
Jamie,
some of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Curtis.
they when the crayfish grab onto a fish, they're trying to pull it down, and what they're trying to do is catch a ride, wear the fish out, pull it down, and then eat it.
That's just crazy. It's just not behavior I ever would have thought of from some little sea bugs.
No, they'll go up and eat the duckweed at the top of the tank. They'll hang upside down and eat it.
That is unexpected.
Could she go on full view so we can all?
So
Yeah, I here, let me spotlight her.
Jamie, I think you've got
Yeah.
Michael still spotlighted. That was the problem.
I have no idea. This is, like I said, the first time.
Does that have her spotlighted for everyone?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
So you've got all different colors. Is that a white one and a red one and a blue one?
Yes. There's a nice white one
this year. That one is absolutely lovely.
Thank you. All right, and then there's this one down here. I like their little angry faces, and they have all these claws, and they'll come at you. Right now they're hungry, so they're doing all this, climbing around.
Have you been pinched yet?
No, but I don't stick my hands in there. I have one that's loose in the room somewhere, because I wasn't using lids with this. I hadn't done it, and then I looked and she was gone. So I have lids on them all now.
What they're going to try and do is back up and the tank. We used to catch these up at, believe it or not, up in Ohio, and there were so many of them. We take butterfly nets, real fine butterfly nets, and go through the water and pull a whole bunch out at a time, and then take them home. And one poor guy put them in his aquarium, and that's what the story that I related earlier was.
Is that
Okay.
Foster tang that you have in that tank? Plants they're nibbling?
I have a little bit of it in here, but I find that it does better in warmer water. So I've got, sorry, I'm dealing with glare recently with this. I have it in the warm water tank with these guppies, and it does a lot better, but the crayfish like to eat it sometimes.
Well,
This Java stuff here, I don't know what it is. It's Java moss or Java fern, and it does better in the cold water tank.
I bought some Swassertang from, I think, Richard once a few months ago, and I put it in my Placo tank, and that was a mistake because that was a very expensive salad.
Yeah, I just put a little bit in if I'm pulling it out of another tank, but this is like a Nacarus, I think, in here, and just whatever I find.
Very cool.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Does anybody else have something that they're working on and want to share or talk about or ask questions about? We've got about 5 more minutes before we wind down and get started. EB had a question?
Yeah, hi. My name's Ebony. This is the first time I've been joining this aquatics club. And I was actually joining because I have a pet turtle that I've had for like 6 or 7 years now. And for the longest time, she was about the size of a quarter. And so I just kept her in a 10-gallon tank. But in the past like 6 months, she's like grown to like the size of my hand. And so I really need to upgrade her tank because I really don't think that the fake plants and the floating log are going to cut it anymore.
Right.
So I was here to see if anybody had any experience with turtles.
I'm going to turn this over to Gerald Pottern, who is our resident turtle expert. Anybody else who wants to join, also let me know. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something's goofy here. Not only my microphone, but the computer speaker just keeps shutting off every about once or twice a minute, and I have to go back and restart it. I have no idea why. But anyway, what type of turtle is it? Is it like a?
It's a yellow-bellied slider.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they get quite big, especially the females. One thing to remember. Well, you've had them for 6 years. Do you take them outside sometimes?
Yeah, in the summer times when she's more active, we have like a $10 kiddie pool that I got from Dollar General, and I would put her in that, and then just like change the water out, because we don't have the space to keep her in it all the time. But when we're like most of the time, she just stays in a 10-gallon tank. But I really think I should get her like a bigger one and better one, and one with like natural flora in it, so that she can like live her best life, I guess.
Your microphone is still out, Gerald. I wonder if your connections to your computer might be loose. Still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. What connection are you talking about?
Well, like if you have your microphone connected into your laptop, or is your microphone like in your laptop? I'm assuming it's internal and it keeps turning off. Yeah, you might try a reboot, and I'll let you back in from the waiting room if you want to try a reboot and come back. Is there anybody else who might be able to help Abby with her turtle questions? I have a lot of experience with marine sea turtles, but and I have one of Gerald's little box turtles who has stayed super small, and he eats worms like crazy. He'll eat any kind of veggies, so he's a good eater, but he's not growing a whole lot. I've been making sure that he gets all of the nutrients he needs and gets some sunshine so that he's getting that UV radiation, because I know that's important for shell development. But I would definitely say an upgrade of something like a 40-gallon breeder or a 75-gallon is in the works if you can't put him or her in a pond outside. That would be my advice, and your mileage may vary. And Gerald, way better advice than me.
Yeah, my thing about, like, I wanted to put her in a pond, but right now, like, I don't really have like any land, and the turtle stays at my parents' house, and they weren't gonna build a pond for her because we have like other farm animals like chickens and stuff, and so we just didn't think it would be like the best idea because there's a lot of predators outside, even for the chickens. So I like, if I couldn't figure out like how to upgrade the tank to accommodate her, then I was maybe going to like donate her to the UNC Marine Biology department or something like that. So
well, they definitely might have somebody there that has a facility for her, and there might be somebody here in the club that would have a pond that she would be a good fit for.
Hey, Jamie, you still got Gerald selected. You might want to let the video float to whoever's talking.
Okay.
but also I think in general some questions here are I don't know how big these sliders get, but you're probably talking about a foot in diameter or something, right? There's one question. Then when you say you want to upgrade your tank, what do you think about? Like just doubling in size, tripling in size? What are your abilities in terms of what you can handle if you want advice on that? And and then in terms of donating somewhere, like this may be, it's not an uncommon type of turtle, I suspect, right, Gerald? You can nod yes or no. Yeah, he's saying yes, which makes it a little bit harder to donate to somebody, right? Unless they just want to put it in their pond. I will say there are, I live near Duke University, and there's a pond kind of behind our house, in the woods. It's one of these dams that they made as part of an ecological thing. There's got to be 100 turtles in that pond, including big snapping turtles.
Oh my.
Yeah, I was thinking, like I want to do my best to try and keep her, but she's only about like maybe 6 inches in diameter, but that's like way bigger than she used to be because she was like the size of a quarter for the longest. And I don't think she needs anything larger than maybe like a 50-gallon tank to swim around and enjoy. And I was just hoping to pick up some tips or something.
One of the things that you can do is you can go to Facebook or the Raleigh Aquarium Society and ask if anyone has a tank there. Or you could just sit there and watch as people offer up tanks. Tanks are very popular to get rid of. I think people don't want to get rid of a tank through the trash. They know how to get rid of fish, and fish, kind of die on their own through attrition. But, you might want to try going to that, or, you could also try, chatting, like I was saying, with Gerald over on the side.
All right. So I do want to encourage everyone. It is now 8 o'clock. That if you have any questions or concerns or things that you'd like to share or chat about, if we could do it over in the Zoom group chat. If you don't know how to open your chat, if you hover over the Zoom primary window, you should see the chat option, or you can hit, if you're on the computer, you can hit Alt-H, and Alt-H will open or close your chat window as well. So feel free to use the chat. Also for questions during the presentation, if you want to bring up questions or ask me something about the presentation, you can feel free to use the chat there. Curtis is going to be our chat moderator, so he's going to save the questions for the Q&A section in about 30 minutes. So today I'm going to be presenting to you, and I want to make sure that everybody is able to see my presentation on the screen. So please let me know if you are not able to see it. I'm going to try to make sure that everyone gets the right view. Okay. All right. Thumbs up, everybody able to see it? Okay. All right, everybody I can see says they can see. So we are going to be talking about aquaponics today. I am going to be talking about aquaponics today, but I also want to encourage you guys to ask questions and participate in aquaponics as much as you can. Aquaponics is actually something that many of us probably already do in some small way in our aquariums. So if we take a look at, sorry, I've got extraneous stuff on my screen. Basically, if hydroponics, which is growing plants without soil, and if aquaculture, which is keeping fish in their habitat, had a baby, what would it be called, right? We would call it aquaponics. So essentially that's what it is. It's growing plants without soil and using the fish and the waste that they produce in order to provide the nutrients for those plants to grow. So an aquaponics setup is quite a simple process and procedure. And it's as simple, it can be as simple as putting plants in your tank. Many of us have plants like ivies and pothos, things like that, that we put in our hang on back filters, or we hang over the sides of our tank in order to absorb some of those nitrates that the fish are producing. Aquaponics is just taking that a little bit more to the extreme. So the basics of aquaponics is that you have your fish in a tank that has a pump that pumps the dirty water from your fish tank into a plant bed of some variety. We'll talk about some of the different types of plant beds that are available, or plant beds that you could create. Then you have your plants. The plants are there absorbing the nitrates, which are the fertilizer produced by the plants after the good bacteria break down those chemicals. And so the plants and the plant bed serves as your biofilter. Then you have a return, and the return puts the water back into the fish tank. Now, this is a very simplistic version of things. There are, of course, some people who add in mechanical filtration and aeration and more water movement. There's a lot of fancy bells and whistles and valves and knobs and additional pumps that you can add. But at the very base of it, this is all aquaponics is. It's using fish poo to grow plants. I first got interested in aquaponics as a teacher when I had to teach the nitrogen cycle to my students, and we were talking about how it is that nitrogen travels through our atmosphere and through our soil and into the water cycle. And so I have built multiple aquaponics systems, and this is my latest one. This is the one that I currently have in my room. It has, I grow herbs on the top in the bed, which is a concrete bin. I plumbed it myself using zip ties, a pool noodle, and some gravel, and a big hole saw, and some PVC pipe. So this was a group project that I actually did in conjunction with our band, who contributed the caster wheels that are on the bottom of the system. These caster wheels alone, to carry the weight of the entire system, each of these caster wheels carries a load of 1,500 pounds, and it makes them the most expensive part of the entire system. So if you want an aquaponic system that is mobile, caster wheels are going to be one of your big expenses. So I do not recommend necessarily making your aquaponic system mobile if you don't have to, because it's going to double the cost of any aquaponics build that you have. I wanted ours to be mobile because we move it from one biology classroom to the other. So it's a lab that we use to travel between classrooms. It's definitely neat to have it on wheels, but unnecessary. So if we take a look at scale for aquaponics, the scale at which I do aquaponics is very small. All of my aquaponic systems are one fish tank, one grow tank, one light system. But aquaponics can scale from the size of a desktop, where you have a beta tank that has one plant growing in the top of it, to like worldwide agriculture scale. So aquaponics is one of the growing sustainable agriculture industries out there, because it provides a readily available source of protein, and it provides opportunities to scale vertically. Unlike many other types of agriculture, you can scale vertically without requiring more additional horizontal space. So this is one of the benefits of hydroponics and aquaponics, is that you can grow plants on top of plants on top of plants on top of plants. This is a double bed over a fish tank that is made with a pond liner and plywood. This is a very simple setup, and it has a single pump, a single filter, and it is 2 beds of herbs. And it is actually, it's kept within a greenhouse so that it can run all year round. And I actually have plans, if you are interested in the blueprints and plans for this particular aquaponic setup, because this is one of the least expensive setups that I've seen. And it is a permanent year-round structure. So I'm going to move this slide real quick. But as I said, you can also do aquaponics in a far simpler system. This is an A-frame gutter type aquaponic system where the plants are simply suspended in rain gutters along an A-frame, which allows you to do 3 layers of plants and to double up on the A-frame. The water then is pumped to the highest gutter, and that gutter will route the water through the irrigation system, and it's simply gravity fed. So the only pump is the pump to get it to the highest level, and then the water is gravity fed through the rest of the system, right? I am a huge fan of pool noodles. I'll use pool noodles every day of the week. Pool noodles are one of the foundations of my engineering skill. Pool noodles and zip ties, that's where it's at. So for my aquaponics bed, the reason I use pool noodles and zip ties, right? Like, what purpose does it serve in my aquaponics system is I wanted to be able to have water flood my grow bed to a certain level. And when it reaches that level, the whole bed drains completely so that there is time for my plant roots to dry out so that they don't get waterlogged. So some aquaponic systems are complete submerged systems where the plant roots are underwater all the time. And only when the water reaches a certain level does it drain off from the hydro substrate. My system is not like that. My system reaches a level and then empties completely, and then it takes about 20 minutes to refill, and then it empties completely. This does not make for a quiet system. It does make a lot of noise when it's flushing, right? And when I was thinking, basically what I want is a flush, right? When it reaches a certain level, then it flushes everything in the system. So that got me thinking, maybe the easiest way to do this is to use a toilet plunger thing. So what I have here is actually a toilet drain, and in your toilet, you have the bobber and the bobber, when it reaches a certain level, activates the drain, which drains your toilet back into the toilet bowl. So I bought this toilet drain at Lowe's for like $7, and what I needed was a bobber. So that's where the pool noodle came in, because it's a flotation device. I zip tied it to this toilet drain. So when the water gets up to the level that I want, the pool noodle floats up, and that opens the drain underneath, and then all the water drains out. Then when the water drains out, the pool noodle is no longer floating, and it plugs the hole again. And then the water will begin to fill up through this drain pipe that's here in the back of the system. Okay, so down here I do have the pump that pumps up and over the back, and then this is the drain pipe right here. Okay, let me show a spotlight on this drain. This is the drain pipe that drains directly from the tub above, and this is the top of that drain pipe. This is where my pool noodle is, the flotation device. Okay, all right. So as far as scale goes, my system is it's not the smallest that you can have. You have I have a friend, and I actually took a picture of their 10-gallon system here, and it's a 10-gallon system where she grows I believe like Italian basil on the top, and that allows her to grow Italian basil on top, and it's the filtration system for her tetras, I believe, that she keeps in this 10-gallon aquarium. There's a lot of PVC pipe here, but it's far simpler than it looks. It is just a pump, some hydro balls, some basil plants, and an output. Right. Okay, I'm getting a lot of people. I want to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody in the waiting room. There we go. All right. So with that said, I want to share with you a very short video clip. It is, I believe, about 5 minutes long, but it is a walkthrough of how to do a DIY small scale aquaponics. It's with a 10-gallon or 20-gallon aquarium. I have the settings set up to share my computer sound. If this skips for you or doesn't work well for your video connection, I will also post a link to this YouTube video in the chat room at the end of the meeting, okay? I'm hoping this will work. Let's see.
Okay, YouTube, what I'm working on today is one of my DIY projects I've been meaning to get to for a while, experimenting a little bit with aquaponics, an aquaponics system. What I've done so far is set up a small aquarium tank on my back patio. I've set up 2 bubble sticks in there just because this aerator pump has 2 lines to it. I'm bubbling the chlorine out of the water right now. I just use tap water, and I'll be adding some fish to this tank later on today. What I'm planning to do is do a styrofoam float bed on top, and with just pots in it, probably grow lettuce and some floating plants. I'm trying to complete this project mostly from materials I have laying around the house. So I took some extra styrofoam insulation board I had in the garage, and then I thought it was a toss-up between the clear punch glasses or the solo cups to use as grow pots, or net pots, homemade ones. So what I did, I needed to cut out the right size circles, and basically I just traced a circle around both the solo cups and the punch cups, which both ended up being the same size. And then I traced the inner diameter of each one as well, or the inner circle around each one, traced it out, and figured out I needed about a 3-inch circle. What ended up being the perfect size was a tin can from the pantry. So I emptied out a tin can and used my heat gun here to heat up the can and a hot pad, and just went ahead and melted it that way. So for demonstration purposes, I've heated up this can. What you do is you just heat it up real hot, push it down on the foam board, push it all the way through, give it a little twist, and then I'll have to break it out. And so when we remove the can, gotta use 2 hands here, leaves us a nice clean hole in the styrofoam for our cups. Okay, so that brings us back to the aquarium out here. We've got our foam board or lettuce wrap cut. So let's check our fit here. Should slide just inside the tank so that it actually floats on the water. And it does. Okay, so with that in place, now we're taking to making the net pots out of the solo cups, which I've chosen to be best for the job. So basically, I'm just going to take a hot soldering iron here. I'm going to melt a series of holes. I figured this was better than trying to drill holes because the plastic is kind of brittle and it might break or tear. this seems to work really well and efficiently. Okay, so I finished going around the cup. I've got holes all the way around it and the top, so it should allow plenty of room for the roots to grow and move through the holes. So now we're going to test these cups in our raft up here. They fit pretty nicely down in there. So here we are with all of our grow pots or net pots that we've made on top of the floating raft for the aquarium. I've got it under a shaded portion of my patio so that it doesn't get too much sun. I don't want the fish to overheat during the daytime. I'm going to try to get some heat tolerant fish to put in here, and hopefully we can create a sustainable system. Okay, so a little bit of follow-up on yesterday. I've actually got the tank set up now with 3 goldfish, an algae eater, and a snail in there just for starters. I tested the water yesterday and it had a very high pH. I got it down to a neutral 7.0 reading and added some aquarium rocks to the bottom of the tank. My clay pebbles came in yesterday, so I went ahead and started out with these plants that are not from seed. I went ahead and got some plants and washed the soil from the roots. Put them in the clay pebbles just to start out and kind of test this system a little bit. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of trial and error at first. Now this one I did start from seed. That's an avocado, and it's actually got a root down to the bottom of the cup already, but it was started about a month and a half ago. It's been just sitting in the windowsill in a cup of water. So we've got rosemary, spearmint. These 2 are little plugs of rosemary that I got off of that hopefully they will take and start growing. And then of course basil. And this is just kind of the beginning of it. I'm going to start some seeded lettuce here in the next couple of days and see if I can add that somehow to this system if these start to do okay.
All right. So again, and he has an update video as well if you're interested in seeing how his little aquaponics system progressed. He did continue with lettuce as a fast growing plant. Lettuce works really well. And I have had excellent success with my potatoes. What I have not had success with is getting my children to eat those potatoes because they think that they were grown in fish poo, so they call them poo-tatoes. And so we still haven't had that conversation about how most other things are fertilized because I don't want them to stop eating vegetables altogether. So we do have an aquaponics facility here in North Carolina that is a large-scale sustainable aquaponics system, and that is at Lucky Clay Farms in Norwood, North Carolina. And actually prior to the COVID shutdown of everything, we had planned and actually voted as a club to go on a tour of this aquaponics facility. I was able to get a few pictures to share, and Jay Levine actually recommended that we go there and view their facility because apparently it's one of the best in the United States. So they actually raise what I believe are tilapia here, and they have huge grow beds. They grow all of their vegetables that they use in their restaurants for their farm. They actually have a resort where people go to take corporate retreats and things like that, and they have these cabins that they allow people to come and stay in for vacation homes. And all of their fish is sourced there in their sustainable facility, and all of their vegetables are from there as well. So the facility is absolutely beautiful. It's clean and it appears quite well run and is a very successful facility by all appearances. So One of the things that really excites me about aquaponics is the ability to grow multiple levels of food on a limited area of space. This allows aquaponics to be something that will allow people to farm in urban environments. It's something that can work on rooftops. It's something that can work in very limited horizontal space, and it being vertically scalable is absolutely huge and quite important. Okay. Here is a vertically integrated and scaled aquaponics system that is set up on approximately a 2 feet by 8 foot long area of driveway. And the system, the aquarium system here is actually quite small, but the vertical integration allows the water to flow through the entire tube, making essentially what would be a garden that took up quite a lot of space into taking up 16 square feet of total space, which I think is kind of neat. Building your own aquaponics system is a quite simple endeavor, although it's very difficult to keep the scale simple. If you're like me and you like to add bells and whistles and little things that like timers, I love putting timers on my aquaponics systems so that they're not flushing in the middle of class, for example, because it's noisy. But you can have a very simple kind of aquaponics setup that is kind of scaled to what you have available and what you want to do with it. Of course, if you're doing an aquaponics system in a 10-gallon tank with a few goldfish, which kind of, you know, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up because we all know about how big goldfish get. But the thing about goldfish is that they are fantastic for aquaponics systems because they produce such a massive amount of waste. And so for aquaponics, it's really fantastic. So here is another, it's actually a goldfish and koi farm that uses the goldfish and koi waste to raise what I believe are pumpkins or eggplant. In this regard, this is a way that you can use the water holding tubs and to do outdoor aquaponics. There are also pre-made tubs available if the budget allows. Of course, my budget doesn't allow because I'm a teacher and all of my stuff is kind of jury-rigged together from what I have available. But if you have the money to spend, you can get very, very nice aquaponic systems that are kind of pre-made and pre-put together and have everything that you need to make them work. So it's a good fit for people who are already tubbing to be able to add a flower bed to the top of your tub. Okay. Here's just another example of how vertical integration can work. Basically, you have your pumps, and then you would have driplets from the side if you choose to use a single pump versus multiple pumps to each layer. You can also have drip beds that drip from bed to bed. It really depends on how much flow you want and what kind of plants that you choose to raise. I love floating plant beds because they're very easy to swap in and out. If I want to swap out these herbs for those herbs, instead of having to uproot all of the netted beds or to pull out a ton of substrate, it's as easy as pulling out the foam float boards. The foam float boards do allow the plants to grow nice long roots, which the fish absolutely love and use for reproducing as well. And the float beds also give the fish a sense of security. And I've seen that a lot of fish breeders use these grow float beds in order to encourage particular species of fish to breed more prolifically. One of the things about using grow float beds is that they do require aeration because you are cutting out your surface area of the top of your water for gas exchange. So that aeration becomes much more important, right? So essentially you've got 3 requirements, and that's plant lights or sunlight, a plant bed with substrate and a drain, and a fish tank with a pump and a hose that goes to your plant bed, right? And there are 2 books that I very heartily recommend to everyone, and that is Aquaponics for Beginners, which you can get from the website howtoaquaponic.com. And the other is from Lexa Blanc. Her book is Aquaponics, the Complete Beginner's Guide to Building and Maintaining a DIY Aquaponics System at Home. These 2 books have been a great guide for me in building my systems, as well as troubleshooting some of the problems that I had with my first setups, and especially troubleshooting the first hurdle to overcome, which was cost. My idea to use lava rocks rather than the very expensive hydroponic substrate actually came from Lexa Blanc's book. And you can buy 50 pounds of lava rock from Lowe's for like $7 or $8. And that same amount of hydroponic substrate would cost maybe $40 or $50. So you can do it for much, much cheaper and essentially get the same results with lava rocks. Okay. You can also build a very inexpensive DIY using sweater boxes. Sweater boxes are nice because they nestle into each other, and they're also very stackable and scalable, and you can do multiple levels with sweater boxes. I've also done sumps with sweater boxes and like wet dry sumps and filters. And essentially this is the same thing. It's just one of those wet dry sumps that has herbs growing out of the top of it, right? Again, in this one, you can see the hydro balls. Those are the dry expanded clay. This one just has a very small pump, the kind that you can buy for $5 to $10 on Amazon, and the hose leading from the bottom sweater box into the top sweater box. And then there are just holes drilled in the bottom of that sweater box to drain back into the fish portion of the tub. As far as what to use as a substrate, Kenneth actually said something in chat about perlite and rock wool making good growing media for plant and hydroponic systems, and that's absolutely true. I love the expanded clay. I was gifted some, and I got some from someone who had shut down their aquaponics system, and I love it, but there are also so many other options. And there's a great website that I'm going to give you guys the link to, which kind of goes through the pros and cons of each of the different substrates. So you have some plants that do better in one substrate or the other. There are costs to consider, as well as kind of maintenance issues to consider as well. So you really want a substrate that's not going to have to be replaced, or not going to decay or break down and clog up your system or your pumps, right? I have not tried all of these. I don't know that anybody has tried all of these, but I have tried a few of these, and from what I can tell, especially on this website, and this is a great website for aquaponics information in general, but I'm going to copy it over into the chat. If it's leaffin.com, with leaffin.com being a primary, essentially a aquaponics go-to website. And with that, that's all I had to share with you guys today, and we'll open it up to any questions. I see one question here from Ryan. He says, how do you manage nutrients in the water if you have a planted tank and you don't want to dose too much in case of algae? And I don't dose nutrients in my water for the aquaponic systems. Most of my my only dosing is when I'm looking at my various necessary nutrients to keep my plants growing. And sometimes I do add additional fertilizer because my aquaponic systems have a very low bio load of fish. I do not keep mine stocked as well as most people keep their aquaponic systems stocked. I don't grow tilapia or any heavy bio load fish. And so the only fish that I currently have in my aquaponic system are a few comet goldfish that are old fish that students have gotten from the fair, the state fair, which still gives away goldfish, unfortunately. Are there any other questions? But managing nutrients in the water, the best thing you can do is add as many plants as you can. If you want to keep your nutrients is from going eutrophic, which is like having too much and getting too much algae growth. The more plants you have and the less light you have, the less algae you'll have. I've never had a problem with algae in any of my aquaponic systems. You don't get algae growth in them because the plants are sucking up everything you've got. Especially if you have fast growing plants like lettuce or potatoes, they're going to pull every bit of nitrate out of that water.
So Jamie, then I think you mentioned that you were using low bioload fish. Why would that be? Wouldn't you want something that's just a much greater bioload to support the plants?
Right now, my aquaponic system is where my jerk fish go. And so it's not by choice. It's just that I opt not to, I haven't gotten any fish to stock my aquaponic system. It's just that's where the fish go that don't fit in anywhere else. And that's where the fish go that my students bring to me and say, hey, I got this fish in the fair. And they go in the aquaponic system. So I would love to stock something that would be a more, a heavier bio load fish, but I try not to buy those fish from the store. So I have enough fish, but it's not by choice. If I were to set it up and I really wanted to run my aquaponic system as more of a producer and to produce more and more greens, then I would certainly stock up on higher bio load fish. As it is, I use mine more as a demonstration piece than an actual production piece because my kids won't eat my potatoes.
Okay, so one of the draws to aquaponics is the fact that, I mean, you can use fish and everything's all integrated together. What about the actual cost of like running pumps and stuff like that? I mean, is this sustainable and is it much more efficient than still using just simply the earth? I mean, what is the true benefit of it if you still have to use electronics to run the pumps and I mean, has anybody what's the offset?
Well, I will say that in looking at that, one of the things that I have noticed is that's a question that is answered by the guys at the Lucky Clay's farm. They actually have an entire spotlight on sustainability, and they're using solar energy from their solar array to run their greenhouse. So their greenhouse is run entirely on solar. And I think if you're looking specifically at aquaponics for sustainability purposes, then you'd want to look at running it off the grid through solar power. And, of course, just like any other kind of aquaculture, you've got the cost associated with running the tanks. And it is going to be equitable to running that size tank, whether you're doing aquaculture or not. But for that same price of running just the fish farm, you can get the plants as well. And so you're getting, you know, more bang for your buck, so to speak. And Thomas has his hand up. Thomas, you had a question? Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I have a kind of a comment, a whole bunch of things. And Paul, you kind of got me started on this. I mean, I think one of the things, that questions you can ask, is step back from it and say, what are you trying to do with this? There's lots of different things goals. Is your goal just to do it because it's fun? That's one. Is your goal to grow a salad, in which case you're trying to maximize the growth rate of the salad? Is your goal just to keep your tank water clean? You know, those are all trade-offs, and will end up influencing what it is you're doing and why you do this. And the other thing I sort of observe is, this is not unlike when you grow plants in a tank, right? It's a closed system in some sense, and you're trying to get the plants in the water to grow and suck up all the nutrients. But if you don't do it right, you don't have the right nutrient balance, you're going to have algae. You can have that with aquaponics probably too. If you might have enough nitrogen in this, that, and the other, but you might still be missing trace elements. But that gets into then what's your actual substrate. If it's inert, it's not going to be very good. If it's got other stuff in it, you're probably fine. It's just that I think terrestrial plants are much easier to grow and much less forgiving about not being optimal. And if you use them to pull nutrients out of the water, it's a lot easier to be successful. But you know, if your goal is to grow salad, you know, then you got to make sure you got enough fish and that you're feeding them enough and all that kind of stuff, and so that you don't starve the plants, right? So there's a lot of ways you can do this. I mean, Larry in his fish room, he did this, but not with a fancy setup. I think he just had roots from some of these plants literally hanging in the tank, right? And that, for some plants, that works and it's good enough. And it's a great way to keep your, kind of clean the water in your tanks. If you do that, you don't need to do water changes as much, right? Because what are you trying to do with water changes? Get rid of nitrogen.
Right. Well, and that's also where it comes in. If you're doing it to keep your aquariums clean and do fewer water changes, which I love to avoid as much as possible, just growing ivy, and it's not for a food source, but it's a beautiful plant. And so it could even just be, this is what I want my plant room to look like. I want to have ivy everywhere. I want to look like I'm living in a rainforest, because, you know, that's kind of what Larry was going for with some of his plants in his plant room, in his plant room, in his fish room, right? And I put a link to the Lucky Clay's farm spotlight on sustainability, so that if you guys are interested, you can take a look at what their setup at the Lucky Clay farm here in Norwood looks like. Did anybody have any other questions or comments?
I got one more quick one.
Okay.
If you want the cheapest and the simplest hydroponic setup, try floating plants, like, you know, salvinia or waterless, things that have the group, you know, that float on the surface. The leaves are out of the water. The roots are dangling in the water, and that's, you know, that's kind of the simplest version of it.
That tank right behind me has duckweed every 2 weeks. It's entirely blanketed with duckweed. In fact, I've been procrastinating on clearing it out, but it helps me not, you know, change it. Gives me an extra day between changing.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
I think scooping out duckweed is easier than changing water in the tank.
It depends on if you want to get all of it.
Oh, yeah.
That's hard.
You just need to make a friend that has goldfish, and you can scoop it out and give it to the people with goldfish. They love it.
That's
Zach, did you have a question?
So in my, Mike Orban here, in my business, we talk a lot about nutrient control in Jordan Lake and Falls Lake. And one of the more visionary ideas is that you don't want to import any nutrients. So you really shouldn't even import food. And you don't want to export anything. You want to keep everything in one place. And so hydroponics really is a closed system where you can control the migration of nutrients, and it stays within a closed system. And so that's a lot different than fertilizing land and waiting for rainfall to water the plants, which takes some of the nutrients and puts it in the creeks and takes it down the eutrophier lakes. So there's an advantage there that's doesn't easily meet the eye, but it is that sort of closed system where you can control the ultimate fate of the nutrients.
That's what I love. That's one of the things that I absolutely love about it. Plus, it's a fantastic opportunity to teach students. And for me, that's teaching students about how these nutrients travel through the system by showing them that we can run nutrient tests on the plant bed. We run nutrient tests on the intake and the outflow and the fish tank beneath, and we can actually trace those nutrients along every step of the way. It is absolutely really cool. So any other questions or comments? Anybody want to go throw some plants in their tank and see what happens?
Gerald made a comment. He said that in the far north and colder climates, you can get a much longer growing season.
Ooh, yes, absolutely. And the fact that you can run an aquaponics system in a greenhouse is an added bonus because you can do year-round aquaponics as well. I believe Jacob says also that it uses exceptionally less water than traditional farming, which makes it very useful in an arid climate. And one of my favorite YouTube aquaponics people is actually doing aquaponics in Arizona. And this is one of his major arguments, is that by doing aquaponics in a greenhouse and being able to vertically scale his aquaponic system within a greenhouse in that closed system where he's cleaning that water rather than using additional water that is having to be brought in from elsewhere is very, very useful. Also, I have a friend who does aquaponics in Hawaii, and it is very useful there because of the low amount, the small amount of farmable land that they have on the volcanic islands there, that being able to do aquaponics allows them to grow a lot of food that they normally would be shipping in from stateside, and allows them to grow fresh veggies that otherwise they wouldn't even be able to grow in their soil.
Jamie, do you think that, like, if you had an outdoor tank with the aquaponics set up on top of it, maybe a 20, a little bit bigger, 20 long, something like that, would you be able to leave it out there in the winter and keep going? I mean, if you put heaters in there to like keep the fish alive, keep the water warm.
If you put heaters in the fish tank, absolutely, you want to prevent freeze over for your fish, but you also would need to create a dome to protect your plants. But if you had warm water going through and you were able to protect the leaves of your plants, you absolutely could keep an aquaponic system running over the winter. Right?
And then the other thing with that would be that your dome would have to be clear. Because see, I was just thinking of, while I was listening to you talk, possibly doing one under the aquarium like a sump, but I don't think it'll work because it won't get any light.
Well, you can install lights underneath your aquarium. And I have a number, I know a number of people who run a sump that has ivy or other plants growing in it. And it's the same concept as using an algae scrubber for a marine tank, where you have live rock and keto algae underneath the tank in the sump. You just have to install a light in your cabinet.
Do you know of a plant that would be easy for aquaponics to act as a cleanser for the water?
Oh, one of the best is going to be lettuce. Any of your lettuce family. Lettuce grows super, super fast. And potatoes absorb so much nitrogen because they use those to grow the carbohydrates in the storage in the potatoes. So I've had really good luck with lettuce and potatoes. as being both big, fast growers and nutrient absorption. Right? A lot of people like herbs because I don't know, I guess it doesn't make them feel so icky about the whole fish poo thing. But for whatever reason, I have really bad luck using the potatoes, with feeding the potatoes to people. Right. It looked like Paul had a follow-up question for Michael.
Yeah, I think it was you, Michael, that was talking about the being a closed system with the fish and everything. So what do they use to feed the fish? I mean, are they eating off of the root structure, or are they eating extraterrestrials terrestrials that fall into the water, or how are they feeding the fish?
Well, I wasn't involved with aquaponics. I was talking more about actually the human environment and how much can you reduce the input of additional nutrients. And so in an aquaponic system, certainly when you feed the fish, you're opening the system and adding nutrients. And then at the other end, you're taking the nutrients out as the plants. And especially if you're eating them, then you're making use of that nutrient. So you can add an exact amount of nutrient in and take an exact amount of nutrient out. What you're saving is that in some traditional farming, you'll have till soil, and then you'll have rainfall, and then you'll have runoff that carries some of that nutrient out of the system. So it's not a completely closed system like a ball that's filled, that doesn't let anything in or out, but you are really tightening the system up a lot by not having those uncontrollable runoff events where rainfall is carrying nutrients downstream.
I agree with that idea that you have a lot more control about what goes in and what comes out of the system, right? By how much you harvest your plants and how much fast growing biota you choose to add versus how many fish you choose to have in the system. So you have a lot more control as far as what you're feeding the fish and what you're getting out of your plants. All right. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments, concerns, feedback, tomatoes to be thrown? All right. Kayla, you had a question?
Yeah. I just joined back on, but I was really enjoying your presentation earlier. And is now like a time to ask like questions about like our own fish tanks, or are we?
Absolutely do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Here, let me highlight you for a second. There you go.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to get some tips and advice from anybody on here. Yeah, I have a number of tanks and they've been doing really well. But recently, I've just been noticing like a lot of there's been like high ammonia in my tanks, and I've been trying to do like everything that I think I should be doing, and it hasn't been lowering the ammonia in at least 2 of my tanks. And then I actually did like the liquid test for ammonia on just straight tap water, and it came out as like 0.5 parts per million just in the tap water. So I'm not sure what to do, and I have my biggest tank is actually doing fine. That's the only one that's doing fine. So like I moved all my other fish from the other 2 tanks into that big tank right now, but it's a little bit chaotic. So does anybody have some tips for me? I did like post on Facebook and people gave me some ideas. And I do use Prime dechlorinator. So yeah.
Can I take a stab at this?
Sure, I'll take anything.
Yeah, so this is Thomas, and I actually sent you some private stuff yesterday, And
Yeah.
this is actually a bugaboo for me, which is quote unquote bad water quality. There's a lot of myths about that, and there's a lot of reactions to the water must be bad as a source of problems. And what I would say is, whenever there's a problem in your tank, the first thing you do is sort of step back and do there's 10 questions to ask, right? There's like, how long has this tank been around? Is it an established tank? Is it a new tank? Has something changed? Did you add something recently? Those kinds of questions. And if you have an established tank, the likelihood of the filter being bad and the ammonia going up is pretty low, unless something happens like the filter gets clogged, or the filter was really undersized for the tank to start with, and on and on. And a really important thing to note is the ammonia test kits will give you a false positive for tap water that's been treated with prime. People don't understand that. But when you treat water with prime, the ammonia is still there. It's just bounded up in molecules that are safe for fish. So when you start testing your water, say, oh, wait a minute, I have ammonia, that may not be an indication of anything wrong at all. So it's sort of like, you got to play detective and back up a little bit and ask the other questions of, like, have you done a water change recently, or, that kind of stuff. So you might want to back up a little bit first.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. It's interesting because like the question you said about, like, is it established or is it new? So the two tanks that are having problems, one is a relatively new one and one is the oldest tank I've had. And so, yeah, and then I did, like, my first reaction was to do, like, test the water and do a water change. And right after I did, like, a pretty big water change in both of them, I tested the water and it still had the same amount of ammonia. But I guess, like you said, it will still show ammonia even if I used prime, but it may not be a problem for the fish. Yeah, I'm just thinking aloud here.
I mean, prime is a safe thing to do. If you like double or triple the dose of prime, just the stuff that's in liquid form, you'll get rid of all your ammonia in the discussion.
I literally, like, do a lot of prime. Like, I was told by people that it's really hard to overdose on prime. So yeah, I just use a lot.
But the other question, back to the detective, is why do you think you're having a problem? What's wrong with your tank that's making you start off and investigate?
So the new tank, I think it's pretty, like, clear that it may not be fully cycled yet. I try, like, it's just the new tank is just a small 10 gallon. And I took old filter media from my established tanks and put it in the new filter for this new tank. So I was hoping that the cycling would happen faster for that, but it makes more sense that the new tank would have more problems. But my the oldest tank I have, which is just a 30 gallon, I've been using it as a breeding tank. Yeah. And there's just been, like, two Acaras in it, and they and also their babies, like, every couple of weeks.
So. But again, I think the question still is, so first of all, doing the filter, like, from the old tank to the new tank, is exactly spot on, and that probably means, again, that you're not really having a cycling problem. But again, why do you think you're having problems? What are the symptoms?
Oh, okay, yes. Now I understand. Yes, the symptoms. Okay, so in the new tank, I had two electric blue Acaras, and I put them in there. They're full grown, and they were doing fine before I put them in there, but after, like, 2 weeks, they started just, like, acting lethargic, like, not really doing anything, just, like, sitting on the bottom of the tank. One of them started getting clouded eyes, but something was going on with both of his eyes, like, growing on it. yeah, I don't know, like white circles were like forming on the eye. I don't know what it was, and he was literally like laying on the bottom of the tank, like not looking good, for a couple days, and I like did water changes and then testing, so that's what alerted me to like something's wrong here, with the fish. And then in the established tank, I had two Cory cat. Yeah, I forgot. I had two Cory cats, little ones with the Acaras, and basically all the fish in there started just like some of the babies were dying off. There was like fungus growing on, or like fungus looking stuff growing on the Corys, and the Acaras, their color changed like super pale. They started looking super pale and just like hiding in like the bottom rocks down in the tank and like not doing anything. And that's like different behavior than they've had before. So I just noticed like they're not acting normal.
So observing fish is exactly the right thing to do, and that's how you often see when they're changing behaviors is not always a good sign.
Yeah.
Were the Acaras sick ones in the original tank and you moved them to the new tank? Is that what happened, or?
No, these are two separate pairs.
Two separate pairs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing is that the pH in all of my tanks is around 6.0, and so maybe, I don't know, I was trying to do some research on it, but do you guys know like what a Carr is like the pH, what they prefer? Or
so really quickly, sorry, just going back to the ammonia thing, I don't keep the Carrs, so I don't know much about that question, but yeah. Something that I did notice, it's maybe a little bit different, and it's I'm not an expert, I'm just a chick with 6 tanks, but I had a similar issue a while back, so I'm on Durham City Water, and the ammonia levels, I'll try to test my tap water every now and again, and they will kind of fluctuate. And so when I first moved to where I'm at, I actually noticed a really similar problem to what you're having. I had a couple of fish showing some weird symptoms, and it was in especially my smaller tanks. Tested the tap water, turned out the ammonia for me was actually around like 1.0, so we love that. But what I ended up doing was just doing a lot smaller water changes, and my assumption was that if my tap water did have ammonia in it, if I was doing really big water changes, I was potentially adding more ammonia from the tap water than the tank ever would have had in it to begin with. And a newer tank with less, I hope I'm explaining this in a way that makes sense, but a newer tank with less of that beneficial bacteria to actually convert the ammonia, I thought maybe I might be just overloading it a little bit, like giving it more than it can handle, especially, in a smaller tank where if it's a 20-gallon tank and I fill up my 5-gallon bucket for a water change, it's like 25% of the water. So the ammonia that you might be adding build up a lot faster. But I noticed that just smaller water changes in general helped me. And I'll stop talking now.
If you guys look over to the chat, Kayla, go look over to the chat. Bob is suggesting to the testing the rainwater versus your tap water to see if the test is bad, and then the test might be bad. These guys over here do have a whole series of comments.
But hold on. So I want to get back to ammonia. I don't think ammonia is the problem. People focus on ammonia. If you treat your water with prime, the ammonia is non-toxic and it won't hurt your fish.
Okay.
Lots of people do this. I have Durham water. Mm-hmm. I do 50% water changes all the time, 50%, never less. And I just dump the tap water directly into my tank, and add the prime before I do that. And I've not had problems. And other people do this too. So, you know, if you're not using enough prime, tap water could be a problem, right? But you'll see that like right away. It'll be like the fish will just, they'll show symptoms within minutes. And if you don't fix the situation, they'll be dead, you know, right away.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, what test kit do you use?
Yeah, I use the like master test kit.
The API one?
Liquid ones, yeah.
Okay, because that only runs to about 6.0. So what I've seen with cloudy eyes a lot of times is if your pH drops even lower than 6, you'll see bacterial infections below that, and you might be even lower than you're able to test. I mean, I've had issues where I've looked at it, my pH is down to 4 dot something. But
oh, wow. Wait, so
down. My source water is RODI, so I need to buffer it, and if I haven't kept up with the buffering, it drops on me.
Yeah, what test kit do you have?
For freshwater, I have RODI, and I have a manual plug-in pH kit.
Okay.
The little test thing I can drop in there, and it gets way down there.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it broke under defects. I can't see where I'm at right now. I'm waiting to come back from Hannah Instruments.
Okay, yeah. All right. Yeah, that's a good point, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I just see the suggestion of buffering, crushed coral, things like that. Those tend to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I said, Raleigh water is already soft, and I start with RODI. I use the CCAM neutral buffer because I have a discus tank, and I don't want to introduce as much salt as you do from the crushed coral, but they're all good options for trying to keep it up. It carries a little more capable. They don't mind a little acidic, but if you see those cloudy eyes a lot of times, it tends to be really low pH is causing a bacterial infection.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that advice. Yeah. So I'll look into what you said you use like
it's a little dip. Hannah Instruments makes it.
Okay. And then what you were saying you add something to your like discus tank?
When I do the water I get out is RODI, so it has absolutely nothing in it. So I start with a CCAM makes something that's called someone here might know what it is. The one that they use for the adding in your base trace elements, your general hardness and stuff like that. So I do that. I add a KH buffer after that to try to keep that up. And then I usually do, because the KH buffer by itself is not good enough, I've been doing the CCAM neutral buffer. I mean, a lot of people don't like playing with pH, and playing with pH tends to cause more problems than not. But when you're doing water that really crashes that low, you have to do something.
So this is actually a really great discussion, but it's morphed beyond ammonia, and it's pH is a great topic. And I have to say again, another related thing is Raleigh tap water, Durham tap water, probably most tap water in North Carolina is very soft. And if you don't do anything to buffer it, you are at risk to pH crashes.
Okay.
And if you have a test kit and the test kit actually doesn't go below 6, you may be much lower pH than you realize. That could be a problem for the fish. And then also when you do a big water change, that will change the pH suddenly, which is a different kind of problem and stress on the fish.
Yeah.
So there's I add to my tap water, I do add baking soda specifically for buffering so that the pH doesn't crash as much.
Okay, so you add baking soda every time you're doing a water change?
Yes.
And like, how do you do that? Do you like have like a bucket that you put the tap water in and then baking soda and then put it into your tank? Or
I don't even, I mean, it's very simple. When I do a water change, I literally take 50% of the water out of the tank.
Yeah.
I go mix in a little bit of prime into a cup and pour it into the tank, enough prime to cover what I'm going to add. Then I turn on the tap water, directly in the tank. And then I add, baking soda. Either, I don't add it directly to the tank, but you can. I just mix it up in a cup and pour it in.
Okay. And, okay, because that is something I can,
It's very easy to do, but you have to do a little bit of research to understand how much you want to add, right?
Yeah.
But that's not that hard. And there's lots of examples of people that have done that. And I encourage people to study this enough to understand that, because if you don't, you're almost inevitably going to have a pH crash at some point in your life that is bad for your tanks.
Okay. Yeah.
And adding crushed coral is another way to get around this problem. People do that. There's different ways to tackle this problem. But if you don't do anything and you don't have the right kind of gravel, you're susceptible to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I have a lot to learn. Yeah.
You can check the over on the chat. There's a lot of stuff that people have been writing. Go ahead, Paul.
Just building on what Thomas was saying, what I do is I use a very fine net, or a very, very fine mesh bag rather. And you could, and this is going to change by aquarium and whether or not you have driftwood or what you have in it. But basic rule of thumb with Raleigh tap water that I've been using, and it works great in all my breeding tanks, is a 1/4 cup of aragonite sand in a fine mesh bag. I throw it in behind the Hamburg mat and filter, and I forget it. So when I do a water change, all I have to do is worry about dechlorination, and that's it. I know the pH is going to move up and down a little bit, but the aragonite sand, I don't have any problems, and everything breeds, and I don't have to worry, and I don't have tank crashes. Now, tanks that I have excessive driftwood takes more aragonite sand. So like some of my pleco tanks that are just loaded with wood,
Yeah.
it's like a 1/2 cup of aragonite sand per 10 gallons. Okay. But, you know, just building on what Thomas said, just research what you want to do, whether it's the baking soda or it's the aragonite sand, but just be consistent week in and week out when you do water changes, because it's the consistency that's going to make everybody in the tank happy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so I haven't heard of aragonite sand before. I'm taking notes. How do you spell that? So I can.
ARAGONITE. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can get like 10 pounds of it for like $10.
Okay. Perfect.
Do they sell it at like Home Depot or someplace? Or do you have to actually order this stuff?
I never found it at any of the large box stores or hardware stores. I think you can get it at some of the local fish shops. PetSmart might actually have it. In a pinch, if you don't have aragonite sand, I do know that most of the pet shops will carry this. You can go get, see which Carib Sea makes it, and it's called cichlid sand.
Okay.
And many of the aquarium shops will have that, but its base component, I believe, is still aragonite sand.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things you can use. I mean, oyster shells are also commonly used. You know, it just depends on what you have handy, what you want to do, and how much you put in your tank. You know, it depends on what your target is. You know, if you're reading, you know, if you have Malawi cichlids, for example, they want really hard water, so you'll put in lots of stuff. If you're just trying to keep the pH from crashing, you want to keep it kind of minimal. And you know, the amount you need really depends on things like how often do you water changes. If you do water changes frequently, you don't have to worry about it as much. If you're like me and you sometimes go 2 months before you actually do one, that's a lot of time for the pH to get out of control.
Yeah. I do weekly water changes. Just cause like I do have like a lot of fish in each of my tanks.
Well, see, if you're doing a weekly water change, did you say you were using Raleigh water?
Well, I'm in Durham, but like right near Raleigh. So
okay, so here's one thing I've noticed though. Whenever I test, every once in a while will test my Raleigh tap water, and it comes in at 2 GH, 2 KH. So if I'm changing water once a week, I know I'm always going to have that minimum buffer of 2 KH built into whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, either do what Thomas does and do a little bit of the baking soda, or do the aragonite sand or the oyster shell or something like that. But the less you change or mess with the water, the less you have to actually add to it, the happier your fish will be over the long haul.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any plants growing?
Yeah. So my biggest tank, the 60 gallon, which is the one doing fine. Yeah, there's a lot of live plants in there. Yeah. And like my new tank that has not been doing well, there's no plants in there. So that may be one thing. And then, yeah, the established 30-gallon tank that is having problems has some plants, not a lot. And I know that plants can be helpful, right? Like with nitrates and different things.
Yeah, but, you know, and when you do a water change, how much are you doing a water change? Like, is it 50%, 25%?
Yeah, I've been doing like 50%.
I mean, if you're doing 50% water changes weekly, that's a lot.
Is that too much?
Well, it's not that it's bad, but it means that your stuff really isn't building up in your tank. I wouldn't expect, you know, with that kind of that's pretty aggressive unless you, because it doesn't sound like you have a lot of fish. You know, you're not heavily overstocked.
Yeah. Yeah, in especially like in the small tanks, there was like in the 10-gallon, there were 2 Acaras. In the 30-gallon, there were 2 Acaras and their babies. Yeah, so maybe I don't need to be doing weekly water changes.
I shouldn't say that because everybody, that's anathema to fish keeping, right? But I mean, I've never been able to deal with them that aggressively. And I found that fish are pretty resilient.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add on what you're saying, Thomas. For me, I found the level of weekly, the water will tell me whether or not I need to do a weekly water change. On my grow out tanks where I have overstocked, I have to do the weekly water change.
Yeah.
On my breeding tanks, where I have like a pair of small apistogrammas in a 20-gallon, I don't have to change that every week. Matter of fact, I will push that out as far as I can in those tanks because it's more stable. It's increased stability the less you make those changes. So if it's an overstocked tank, you're going to have to do it more. And that's the tank that I definitely would throw in excessive amount of plants. And then the lightly stocked tanks, those are the ones that you might be able to go 2 weeks without a water change or longer, depending on how well balanced the aquarium is. I've got a shrimp tank that I go about every 120 days and I do a water change.
Yeah.
And I've got other tanks that 7-10 days, and because it's just overpopulated, it has to be changed. So let the fish, the quantity of fish also tell you what you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is good stuff, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure we solved your problem though. And just looking at the chats, there, you know, people seem to be agreeing that the water changes are pretty aggressive. So that's not really where the problem is. And getting back to, well, are you really seeing fungus on your fish? And that's, you know, that's disease. That's a bad place to be in.
Yeah, not good. What's interesting though is, so the 2 Cory cats that I had in one of the tanks that was really struggling, I quickly took them out and put them in like what do you call those, like a little like mesh breeder box in the big aquarium, just because I knew that the large aquarium's water was better, like better quality and more stable. Anyway, and now the Cory cats are doing better. They had literally like white stuff on them in the bad tank, and now they're in this big tank, and 2 days into it, they literally don't have anything on them anymore. And I didn't treat or do anything. Like I didn't treat with salt or any medication. So that was just confusing to me. I'm glad that they're doing better. But there's something obviously going on with the tank that I took them out of, I think. So
I mean, that suggests water quality when you move them out and they get better.
Yeah.
But we're missing something here, it seems still.
Okay, so let me see. So what I have in the struggling tank is, I said, some plants. My gravel is just like white gravel from PetSmart. I have some driftwood in there, And I also have rocks. Now, one thing that may be a problem is so these rocks I actually didn't buy from a fish store. I took them from my yard, but that was literally like 9 months ago, and added them to this tank. So could these rocks be like leaching out something that's like bad? I don't know. And the filter that I have on this tank, it's just a hang-on back filter, a Tetra like Whisper 30-gallon capacity, like for a 30-gallon tank. So yeah.
And the filter is, it's got floss in it or something, and you clean it every once in a while. It's not like it's plugged up or anything like that.
Yeah. So yes, I like change the filter every month, but I also learned that like good bacteria like grows on like the old like filter media stuff, and so I like try to keep as much in there as possible, but maybe that's clogging it up. Maybe.
Well, what do you mean by you change the medium? I mean, changing is not what you want to do. You might want to clean it, but if you change it, you're putting something new in that doesn't have bacteria on it potentially.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, what I mean is there's, what do you call those things? Filter cartridges or whatever. That you put in the filter, and there's like carbon stuff.
Yeah, there's like a carbon filter, like, or something
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a little, so like at PetSmart and different places, they like say to change it like every month. And so that's what I've been doing, but I've also realized that like what you said, if you're just taking out an old filter and just putting a brand new, taking out the old filter like mesh bag and putting a brand new one in, that's like taking away like the surface that the bacteria was growing on. And so I guess what I've been doing is putting like a new cartridge in every month that has like the carbon in it, but also leaving the old cartridge.
Well, but I'm missing something here. The cartridges sound like they're just carbon, and you could replace those, but there needs to be like a piece of floss or foam or something, which is the actual biofilter.
Oh yeah, there's a it's like a, I wish I could go get it. It's yeah, in the filter it's like this blue like
It's like a sponge or something.
Whatever. Yeah, that you're never supposed to take that out.
But do you ever clean that or squeeze it out or anything?
No, it's actually not. It's not a sponge.
It's kind of plasticky on the Tetras. I don't think it has a very good surface on those. So I really don't.
That's not
like the Tetras for that.
Maybe that's not good then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear to me what your biofilter actually is, and whether.
Okay.
I mean.
Yeah, maybe I don't have adequate filtration, like, or the.
But the hang-on filters are I thought it's kind of a no-brainer. They come with a biofilter in it. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, other people can speak up here if you know the brand.
It kind of has this blue little plastic that's got grates on it to try to get things, but it's kind of a plastic that's made of.
Yeah.
So I don't know how good the surface is for actually growing lots of bacteria.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you talking about this thing?
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Carolyn. Helpful. Yeah.
One helpful thing I'll do today. I'm gonna mute myself again.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about, Thomas. Yeah. So it's like not, you can't like squeeze it. Right?
To me, that's not a biofilter. I mean, a biofilter is something that's got a lot of surface area on it. It could be like a bag of gravel. It could be like, bio balls. It could be like something that looks kind of like a sponge or filter floss. And it's designed for the bacteria to be on. And that's what the biofilter part is. That blue thing that she showed is not a biofilter.
Or like or a big enough like space to really be a biofilter.
Well, I mean, think of a sponge filter. The sponge itself is the biofilter.
Yeah.
right? Because it's pulling water through the sponge, and there's all kinds of pores and surface area there.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have that, you may, it's possible you have a borderline filter problem, where it works mostly, but not enough, but I'm speculating a little bit here, and you've been okay for months with that tank, right?
Yeah. I'm looking in the chat also. So like some people were asking, like, do you have a sponge on the intake? So when I was saying that, like, I change like the carbon each month, the carbon is inside a mesh bag. So does that,
Well,
it gets changed every month though.
So a carbon filter like pulls out chemicals. It'll pull out things. It's not a bad thing to have necessarily, but it's not normally what people think of as a biofilter. And when you replace it with something new, whatever biofiltration it was doing before, the bacteria is now gone, right? Because it's more, that people use carbon filters for like removing, trace elements and, chemicals they don't think they want to have in the tank. I personally don't ever use them. It's just like, I don't have a need to it. And, some people do. So they're not inherently bad, but I guess I'm concerned, at least at one level, that it's unclear what you have for a biofilter.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's where your ammonia problems are coming from, is because every time you change that cartridge, if that's it takes several weeks. The good bacteria grows on it. Everything kind of starts to stabilize, and then you replace that filter cartridge and you start all over again.
Yeah. And so someone did tell me that, and so that's why I still do the replacing the new filter filter cartridge, but I also take like the old filter cartridge thing, and like I take it off its plastic thing, and I just take that bag, the mesh bag that I think the bacteria is growing on, and I try to like stuff it back into like the back of the hang on back filter, like behind the new cartridge thing. But maybe that's still not the best either. Yeah, because like there's a limit to how much I can like keep stuffing back there.
Do you only have the one filter on your tank?
Yeah, I only have one hang on back filter for each tank.
I'm going to make a suggestion, and that would be just to get a very small sponge filter and drop in there. And once you get that sponge filter up and running and it's fully cycled with beneficial bacteria, you can swap that filter cartridge out in your hang on back anytime you want, and you will not have to worry about the fluctuations in ammonia, because the sponge filter will take care of it.
Okay. So yeah, I've been recently learning a bit more about sponge filters, and yeah, I've been curious.
So sorry, if I can comment on sponge filters here. I inherited a classroom that had a whole bunch of the hang on the back filters because it's what everybody buys, and I had tons and tons of problems with them, and eventually I switched over to these really giant sponge filters. I'm going to see if you can see it.
Okay.
So I have to kind of look at this, but if you can see that there's a sort of a black wall at the end of one tank, and that's what the Mott filters are that people have been talking about, and it's just a sponge filter this big. And if I went and I grabbed that thing, which I had to a couple days ago because something was out of place, my fingers would look like I just stuck them in like hot tar. I mean, they'd be totally black with stuff in there, and those biofilms are really good. And I'll have research assistants who need something to do, and I'll say, why don't you test the tanks? And now that I've switched those over, I'm seeing, I've had fish die in a tank and sit there and like rot all weekend, and then we still don't have ammonia detectable. They're much, much, much more effective when you get that in there. So I really think it's a good idea to think about something that's really heavy on the bio, because I had real issues with those hang on the back, exactly the same design that you're talking about. I know exactly which parts you're talking about. They just did not ever do anything good for me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm probably gonna look into those sponge filters then. Yeah. Is that what a lot do people do a lot of people on here use sponge filters? I mean, like you were just saying that, Eric, that you were using them, but do others?
I have 16 tanks, and I have 16 tanks that are used on or ran on sponge filters. And I only have several hang-on back filters, and those are used only in aquariums that I either specifically want additional water flow, or let's see here in this corner right here, you can see I did some maintenance on the tank, and I put a hang-on back on the front of it just to as a mechanical filter to get extra debris out. The other end of the tank, this whole black section right here, if you can see the where I'm pointing at, that is all Hamburg Matten filter. That is a 2-inch thick piece of foam that covers the entire wall.
And it's,
Okay.
is it just a piece of foam that just sits there, or is there like an air stone in it, or?
It has the foam has a lift tube in the back of it, and it basically draws the water through it. It comes up the lift tube and it enters back into the tank. So the beauty of it is, if I lose power, I never worry about any of my tanks, because even though there's no water flow, the bacteria is not going to just start immediately dying. So I don't worry about. But back to your problem with ammonia and stuff, that takes care of it right there. I don't have. I mean, I clean it occasionally. It tells me when it wants to be clean, based on the water level behind the filter. And I use the hang-on back. A couple days ago, that hang-on back was on a different tank that I was doing maintenance on, and I stirred up the bottom, and so I put the hang-on back simply as a mechanical filter. And in a day or two, this hang-on back I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it in the next room, I'm going to clean it and just set it aside until next month when I use it again.
Okay, yeah.
So I think the quick answer to do people use sponge filters? The answer is yes. They are probably the best, most reliable, safest, easiest to use filters. I think they're not so popular in show tanks because they're kind of big and not necessarily pretty.
Yeah.
But in terms of how well they work and also they're really great. And you can just go to Amazon and places and find them that are ready made. You just buy them for $10, right? I think in like Paul's case, he's kind of custom made it to fit his tank and all, but that's like the super duper version. So all you need is a material that water flows through. That's kind of a foam that's porous.
Okay.
And there's lots of different designs for doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is good stuff, guys. I really appreciate you guys trying to help me. Yeah. I really joined this group because I really wanted to learn from all you guys who are a bit more seasoned and more experienced in all this. So yeah. All right. So I'm gonna look into those sponge filters. Yeah. Yeah. And in the meantime, do you guys think that I can just keep doing large amounts, large doses of prime, and just keep observing how my fish are doing, and then work on getting sponge filters? What do you guys think?
But Thomas, I got a follow-up question with you based on what Kayla just asked. Now, prime binds ammonia for approximately 36 hours. Is that true?
I have no idea. I bet it's longer than that, but I have no idea.
Okay. The rule of thumb that I've always gone is I have always just calculate 36 hours.
Yeah.
Now, because I use sponge filters, I almost never test ammonia. I don't have problems between plants and sponge filters.
Yeah.
I just don't ever have ammonia problems. But if I were to do a water change, I always assume that it's going to bind for at least 36 hours. And in that time, that sponge filter will completely consume all of the ammonia. So if I do a water change, I will not test my water. If I were going to test my water, I don't even test it for at least 2 or 3 days after that water change.
Okay. Yeah.
That time frame varies on your pH. The lower your pH, the longer it lasts, but I wouldn't count on that. I would 36 hours is a pretty good rule. Stick to that and assume that after that might be time again.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, I don't have problems with ammonia. My biological filtration is great, and I use oregonite sand in all of my tanks. I don't really have the pH drops. I sit normally around 7.2, unless I am working with a specific species that needs softer water, and I'm using RO.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I have the pH issues on my end at times, because I'm working with RO all the time trying to keep discus. But my other tanks that aren't discus, I use the Ragonite SAM too. I run canisters, and they also do great for keeping up my never ammonia issues.
Yeah, I've heard about canister filtration too. Yeah.
But the sponges are definitely usually a little cheaper, and sponges definitely work well. I know plenty of people who have great success with them.
And if you look inside most canister filters, they usually have a sponge.
Pretty much, yeah. I have that, and I have the sponges, and then I also have on top of that some of the CCAM matrix mixed with whatever the fluval equivalent is, because it's what it came with. But it didn't come with enough, so I put more in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
If you already have the hang-on backs, you can always get foam like 30 or 40 ppi, and you can cut it and you can put it in there and leave it in there. I have several hang-on backs that I use that had like filter cartridges in them at one point, but instead of replacing them, I just got some foam. I put as much as I could in there, and then I never touch them unless it clogs. I also put like a small piece on the intake, and that usually gets cleaned before I touch the inside of it, because most of the bigger debris will get caught on that first.
Okay.
And then I actually had a similar, I don't know how similar it is, situation in one of my tanks last week. I was testing the tank to see why my fish were doing something very similar. They were kind of lethargic, just kind of hanging out at the bottom. They were darker color. And so I was like, oh, okay, let me see, I'll test my parameters. So I had about, I don't know, maybe 1 parts per million of ammonia or something like that. I was like, okay, that's kind of strange. Oh, let me put some good bacteria in there. Maybe there's not enough bacteria in there. It's not a new tank, but it's only been set up for maybe a month. So I'm like, oh, well, let me throw some good bacteria in there and see what happens. I tested it the next day, and still ammonia didn't change. Okay. And then the next day, I checked it again just to see. So it's been 3 days. Oh, it's still the same. What's going on? I tested the pH. pH read 6. Okay. Well, and then I recently watched a video about a guy who was breeding cardinal tetras, and he would keep the pH very low, around 4 for breeding cardinals. And he was saying that beneficial bacteria also feeds on carbonates, and if you don't have enough carbonates in the water, they won't feed on it and they won't convert the ammonia to nitrates. And so I was like, oh, let me just give it a shot. I put maybe about a dime's worth, maybe less worth of baking soda in there, and within 8 hours my pH was about 6.8 and I had 0 ammonia in the tank. So it's just something to think about. That's just my personal experience I had recently with the tank. So
Yeah, because like we were like talking earlier about like my pH and my ammonia. So it sounds like I have similar problems, and the pH and the ammonia, and they just seem that they're connected like that too. So yeah.
Yeah, water chemistry is from way back when. It's the Bermuda's Triangle of aquatics.
Yeah.
A lot can go wrong, and like the other thing that's interesting that people don't know about is ammonia is much less toxic at a lower pH than at a higher pH. And so, for example, if you do a water change and your pH goes up, the existing ammonia you had might shift from, there's like an ammonia imbalance. It may shift in the wrong direction and cause problems, even though the level of ammonia has not changed. So there's things like that can get into this mixed into this as well. Bottom line is, you don't want ammonia in your tank. if you have a proper biological filter, you just won't.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like people are saying in the chat, like, I need to like work on the stabilizing like the pH, like using that sand or crushed coral or baking soda, and then working on getting a sponge filter or some kind of good like biofilter stuff. So yeah.
Getting back to the specific filter you have, doesn't it say it does biofiltration? Is there like an attachment for it or a particular thing you can put in it? I would hope so.
Well, remember earlier when Caroline like showed that like blue piece? That's what they're calling the biological filter thingamajig. I don't know. Yeah. So like I could, like what someone else was saying, like I could buy like some really like fine like mesh or sponge or whatever and try to like put it in the filter, hang on back filter, and sort of like rig it up to be yeah. Does that make
Well,
sense?
but I think the advice that a couple people said basically said, I've used these hang-ons before. They are trouble. When I switched, but my problems went away. That's probably good advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find the problem with hang on back filters is you can't put enough of the biomedia in there for the tank size. Usually there's not enough room. And also, if you do decide to add baking soda, I caution you to use a very small amount, because like what Thomas is saying, if it does end up raising the pH, if you have a lot of it in there, it can become more toxic. So just start off with like a very small, tiny amount, maybe like a pinch or two, and just see, because the bacteria doesn't need a lot of carbonates, but it does need some, and that's part of what causes the pH to go down, is because they're actively eating it. So
I don't know if you can see this on my screen, but this is my pH control system. It's baking soda and a little itty bitty spoon. So I do very small amounts when I do it, so it doesn't change it, dramatically.
Do you guys have like a certain amount like of baking soda that you use per gallon, or is it you're just saying like add teensy little bits and then keep testing it and seeing?
I get a feel for how much it affects it, for each tank. I'm like, little 4 of my scoops will do this much, and it's just kind of a trial and error, once you learn it.
Well, I mean, I've done this before, and I've got the number somewhere. We could maybe follow up in email or something. But like I do 1 teaspoon of baking soda per 10 gallons for water change, and it raises it like by 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. It doesn't raise it by much, but if that using that as a base, you can say I want more or less. And so a pinch is not a very good amount, because my pinch and your pinch are probably very different, right?
Yeah.
And it depends also on how big of the tank you're talking about. But like a teaspoon per 10 gallons is pretty safe. And get a test kit that measures KH and just measure it before and after. Or put 5 gallons of water in a bucket, measure the KH, add some baking soda, mix it up, measure it again, and it's not that hard to do, and then you get a sense for what works, and you gain confidence.
Yeah. And so also KH is that part of the pH?
It's
like
the buffering. Yeah, there's GH, which is like calcium, magnesium. There's KH, which is the buffering, and then there is the pH, and those are kind of like the three legs of of water chemistry in some sense, because they interact with each other.
Yeah.
Okay. KH kind of controls how prone your system is to the pH swinging. So the higher your KH is, the more the less prone your system is going to be to it swinging around. But there's also a point where your KH can be too high. But based on what you're doing with your water changes and you're wearing on dormant water, I think it's highly unlikely you're anywhere near that point. So
yeah,
it sounds like you're probably on the low end. I'd be worried about your pH kind of swinging around based on what it's doing. And it's one of the things you see with a tank where you're converting ammonia to nitrate. Is the more efficient that system is on a low KH system, you'll see pH swings lower faster.
Kayla, if you have a low pH, okay, it's acidic. So think of it as the KH. So when you go over 7 or neutral, when you go up in the higher, when your water is acidic, it's going to eat away at the KH.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have KH and you're as long as you have KH, the acid in the tank, if you will, has something to kind of consume. But after a week or 2 weeks or however long you go between water changes, okay, that acid is going to keep eating away at the KH. So the more driftwood you have, or something that's more of a that's decaying in there, is going to create more acid, and it's going to deplete all the KH. That's why you have to continue to put something in as a buffer to raise the KH again, because the acid keeps eating it away.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And like the KH is so like what you do in your tanks, you add that aragonite sand. And is that what's replenishing the KH? Is that right?
Yes. Well, 2 things is replenishing the KH. Most of my tanks get changed, the water gets changed once a week. And I know in my Raleigh tap water, it's coming out at 2 KH. So over the last 6 days, if KH has been consumed a little bit, if you, and remember, this is kind of dumbed down. I know like Eric Butler and Thomas can give you a much more detailed scientific approach to this, but I know when I do a water change, I'm putting additional KH into the tank. I also have the aragonite sand on different tanks, depending on what species or what I'm working with in there. I may have oyster shells in addition to aragonite sand. You just have to know what's the species, what they're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And just to add to what you're saying, Paul, you don't need to know water chemistry to know what you're saying. And that there's what you need to know to keep your water stable is that you need to have enough KH. If the KH gets depleted, you're in trouble. And acid depletes the KH, and acid is the end result of the nitrification cycle. You know, so as water changes, takes the acid out, takes as long as you're replenishing the KH, either by adding it to the water change like I do with baking soda, or if you've got some material in the tank like gravel or aragonite or oyster shells that will add to the KH back, over time. That's how you kind of keep all this stuff in balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the end result of the nitrogen cycle is like nitrates.
But it's an acid. It'll lower the pH.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow, we water chemistry'd everyone out. Somebody's hungry. Somebody's hungry, as in like in the country.
I got to get going. I need dinner. Blood sugars are dropping, so I need dinner and a drink. So
I just didn't want to step in and stop anything because I loved the conversation that was going on. So,
I know it was so good, but I am starved.
All right. Well, I have to eat something as well. So I'm going to shut things down here on my end. And I hope that we will see you guys again for our next meeting.
All right.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks so much, everybody, again. So.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right.